Hello, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us, and welcome to Firstpost America. I'm Eric Ham, coming to you live from the nation's capital in Washington, D.C. Today, financial markets around the world continue their slide as investors outright reject the Trump tariffs announced last week. Fears of a global recession take hold as nations brace for more fallout. We've got the latest from the White House and beyond, but first, we start with the latest headlines. U.S. President Donald Trump to meet Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Washington shortly. Tariffs, the war in Gaza, and tensions with Iran will likely dominate talks. China and Cambodia hold joint military exercises at a newly expanded naval base on the coast of the Gulf of Thailand, a facility the United States worries could become a military outpost for Beijing. New Zealand unveils a major military overhaul, which includes doubling defense spending over the next decade with billions allocated to missiles, cybersecurity, and drones. Floods in the Democratic Republic of Congo's capital, Kinshasa, kill at least 30 as torrential rains over the weekend destroyed several homes and roads. And a medical transport helicopter crashes into the sea in southwestern Japan, killing 3 of the 6 people on board. The cause of the accident is currently under investigation. We begin today with the global market implosion that's wiped away trillions worldwide since last week. Stock markets continue their plunge today after the commander-in-chief maintained last week's sweeping tariff plans while China escalated the trade war with heavy tariffs on U.S. exports, sparking fears of a global recession. Major Asian markets led the downfall as investors bet the mounting risk of a recession could see the U.S. Federal Reserve cut interest rates as early as May. Japan's benchmark Nikkei index was down 7.8% at close, while stocks in Hong Kong saw a more than 13% drop, their worst since the 1997 Asian financial crisis. In mainland China, the CSI 300 plummeted over 7%, while in Taiwan, stocks suffered their worst fall on record, tanking nearly 10%. Australia's benchmark index dropped over 4%. And emerging markets in Asia were also underwater, with India's Nifty 50 slipping over 3%. The pain likewise engulfed Europe, with Frankfurt slumping as much as 10% at opening. And similarly, futures for Wall Street's markets were also taking a massive hit, adding to last week's $6 trillion in market losses. The carnage came as President Donald Trump told reporters aboard Air Force One that investors would have to take their medicine and he would not do a deal with China until the U.S. trade deficit was sorted out.
I don't want anything to go down, but sometimes you have to take medicine to fix something. I spoke to a lot of leaders, European, Asian, from all over the world. They're dying to make a deal, but I said, we're not going to have deficits with your country. We're not going to do that, because to me a deficit is a loss. We're going to have surpluses, or we're at worst going to be breaking even.
The president posted on Truth Social a claim that there was no inflation and asserted that the U.S. was generating billions of dollars per week from existing tariffs. Countries across the world have been scrambling to figure out how to respond to the tariffs, with China already retaliating quickly by imposing a 34% tariff on American exports as of last Friday. Beijing accused Washington of unilateralism, protectionism, and economic bullying with its reciprocal tariffs.
The U.S. is practicing hegemony in the name of reciprocity. It sacrifices the legitimate interests of other countries to serve its own self-interests. Putting the U.S. first over international rules is a typical act of unilateralism, protectionism, and economic bullying.
Meanwhile, experts predict continued volatility in the coming days and weeks, with a short-term resolution to the trade war appearing unlikely. Billionaire investor Bill Ackman also weighed in, warning that President Trump was losing the confidence of business leaders and ignited an economic nuclear winter.
by placing massive and disproportionate tariffs on our friends and our enemies alike, and thereby launching a global economic war against the whole world at once. We are in the process of destroying confidence in our country as a trading partner, as a place to do business, and as a market to invest capital.
So with no clear resolution or relief in sight, global markets face unprecedented volatility as the trade war continues to escalate. And not just the plunging stock market, but President Trump's sweeping tariffs are now shaking everyday Americans, and they're fighting back. Over the weekend, a tidal wave of protests erupted across the United States and beyond as hundreds of thousands of people rallied against President Trump's policies and what organizers describe as a billionaire takeover of the American government. The movement, dubbed Hands Off, staged more than 1,300 mass action protests at city halls, federal buildings, congressional offices, state capitals, and public parks. Protesters flooded the streets across New York, Atlanta, Boston, and Denver, as well as smaller towns and state capitals across all 50 states. According to Indivisible, a major group behind the demonstrations, nearly 600,000 people had signed up to attend. However, organizers claim that millions ultimately turned out coast to coast.
I mean, the things that he's doing is not trying to make America better. He's ruining our infrastructure, like every department in our government. He's right now destroying our economy. He's taken away all of our allies. We're a pariah in the world. Congress sits back and does nothing. And we have to stand up and take our country back.
Even former Vice President Kamala Harris, who lost the 2024 election to President Trump, also made a comeback and voiced her support on social media. Taking to X, the former vice president said, quote, "Today in every state across our nation, Americans are standing up," end quote. The fire also spread beyond the U.S. borders. In Vancouver, Canadians gathered to decry the commander-in-chief's tariffs and reject his suggestion of absorbing Canada as a state. Protesters also waved flags and held signs declaring Canada is already great.
It's really important that people around the world band together to stand opposed to Donald Trump's attempt to realign the world into the interests of fascists and strongmen. And I think it's really important for us to say we definitely don't want any part of this plan.
Meanwhile, Europe also saw coordinated protests in London, Berlin, Paris, Frankfurt, Lisbon, and beyond. But even as the world rises in protest, the White House remains unmoved, dismissing the rallies as political theatrics.
The way he's destroying our democracy, I mean, dismounting the whole government and his politics, his everything. I'm sorry to say, I'm a New Yorker originally, and I know what Trump's about. That guy is, he's poison. He's a liar. He's a thief. He's a con man. He should be in prison.
Still, the momentum is growing. The streets are louder, the signs bolder, and the questions heavier. And as the protests stretch into another week, one question lingers. What will Donald Trump do next? And staying with the Trump administration, Vice President JD Vance is now walking through a political minefield of his own making. In what was supposed to be a routine media appearance to sell President Trump's bold economic vision, the vice president, while speaking to Fox News, argued that the globalist economy pushed by former presidents was a failure that awarded elites and other nations. But when speaking on China, his comments triggered varied reactions on social media. Taking a dig at China and Chinese nationals, Vance allegedly referred to them as peasants.
I think it's useful for all of us to step back and ask ourselves, what has the globalist economy gotten the United States of America? We borrow money from Chinese peasants to buy the things those Chinese peasants manufacture.
Critics pointed out that the vice president's comment came off as demeaning and dehumanizing, particularly from a man who once wrote about his own poverty-stricken childhood in Hillbilly Elegy. Another social media user even pointed out that how does a vice president get away with calling Chinese people quote-unquote peasants in 2025? And he also pointed to China's own transformation from rural hardship to high-speed railways, advanced electric vehicles, and futuristic cities. One commenter noted Chinese peasants are doing better than a lot of Americans right now, adding fuel to the debate about whether the vice president's remarks were rooted in reality or just old-fashioned American exceptionalism. Even Chinese commentators weighed in, noting that the Chinese have invested a lot in development and not in wars, and then pointed out that for decades the American people have benefited from good and affordable Chinese products. But as the internet lit up, Vice President Vance did not back down. Instead, he pressed on the administration's broader message that the U.S. economy is undergoing a necessary, if painful, transformation.
We're not going to fix things overnight. For the first time in your lives, you're going to actually think about the Americans who make the products, the Americans who produce these products and work in these factories. It's time for us to take care of them instead of taking care of the world.
Now, whether the commander-in-chief and his vice president are in fact building political capital or burning bridges, one thing is certainly clear. JD Vance is not softening his stance anytime soon. And if this is just the beginning of his vice presidency, America may need to brace for many, many more blunt headlines. And now shifting focus to the Caribbean, while the Bahamas might be among the top Caribbean tourist destinations for Americans, they could possibly be rethinking their trip to the island nation this holiday season. That's because the U.S. State Department has issued a renewed warning for travelers heading there, urging them to be extremely cautious due to rising crime, gang violence, and shark attacks. But a change in itinerary by the Americans dropping the Bahamas from their holiday list could have a major economic impact on the island, which is heavily dependent on tourism. Our next report has more.
If you are planning to travel to the Bahamas, then you must think twice. This warning comes from the United States State Department. In a travel advisory issued for the Caribbean nation, the department has urged Americans to exercise increased caution due to a concerning rise in armed robberies, sexual assault, and recent shark attacks. The State Department highlights Nassau and Freeport on New Providence and Grand Bahama Islands as areas of particular concern. Within Nassau, the over-the-hill neighborhood south of Shirley Street is identified as a high-risk zone where gang violence has tragically resulted in deaths of residents. The State Department strongly recommends that travelers lock all doors and windows and avoid opening their doors to unknown individuals. They also advise against physically resisting any robbery attempts. It emphasizes the strict laws regarding firearms and ammunition in the Bahamas. Even small quantities or accidental possession can lead to detention, being barred from leaving the country, and potential jail time and significant fines. Beyond crime, the State Department raises serious safety concerns regarding water activities. There have also been reports of sexual assaults committed by jet ski operators, particularly near downtown Nassau beaches. Tourists are strongly advised not to swim alone, to be cautious of watercraft operating close to the shore, and to assess their physical fitness before engaging in activities like snorkeling. The advisory also urges vigilance in public restrooms. Not just this, the boating industry in the Bahamas has also been described as poorly regulated, with numerous reports of injuries and even fatalities. Concerns exist about unsafe watercraft and operators lacking proper licenses or insurance. Adding to the concerns, the State Department now also includes shark attacks as another safety risk travelers should be wary of. It recommends Americans register for the Smart Traveler Enrollment Program known as STEP to receive updates and assistance during emergencies. They also urge travelers to purchase travel insurance that includes evacuation coverage and to review the CDC's travel health information. The Caribbean nation of Bahamas relies heavily on tourism for its economic growth. Tourism accounts for about 70% of the Bahamian GDP and provides jobs for about half of the country's workforce. And the biggest source of tourists for the country is the United States. In 2023, the Bahamas received over 7.2 million tourists, and around 80% of those visitors were from the US. In 2024, the country welcomed a record-breaking 11.2 million international visitors. So the latest travel advisory by the US State Department could directly impact the economy of the Bahamas. Amid warnings, will Americans now look at another holiday destination in the Caribbean?
And finally, we take you straight to the heart of New York City's food scene. A Michelin-starred South Indian restaurant, Semma, found itself on the chopping block after two TikTok influencers served up a not-so-hot take. They didn't just pan the food, they butchered cultural references, called the dishes mystery sauce, and compared biryani to Wonder Bread. Enter American TV personality and former Top Chef host Padma Lakshmi. She clapped back with a scathing video defending the South Indian eatery, and she wasn't alone. Social media users quickly followed suit, calling the restaurant review not just clueless, but casually racist. Here's the full dish.
In the ever-spicy world of TikTok restaurant reviews, two influencers decided to stir the pot against an Indian restaurant, only to find American TV personality and author Padma Lakshmi waiting on the other side with a ladle full of sass. It was a calm day in New York's West Village until the VIP list, a pair of self-proclaimed food critics with a flair for bluntness and hot takes, set social media aflame with their scathing review of Semma. It's the city's only Michelin star Indian restaurant. Their review, posted with all the subtlety of a Bollywood villain, kicked off with a proclamation. One of the influencers said,
"This is why I've lost faith in the Michelin system."
What followed was a performance in culinary cluelessness, pronouncing tikka as tikki, likening the biryani to Wonder Bread, and even saying that the biryani cart outside her house serves a better plate. One of them even claimed she almost went full Helen Keller when the sauce hit her eye. Naturally, not everyone appreciated their hot takes with a side of ignorance. Enter Padma Lakshmi, television host, cookbook author, and walking culinary clapback. In a deliciously biting video captioned, "Semma is for us and they not like us," Padma minced no words. She said that she's pretty sure Michelin doesn't care about them either. Padma Lakshmi went on to suggest that before food influencers roast other cuisines, they might want to learn to pronounce the dishes they're criticizing, or actually understand the culture they're judging. "There's no tikki anything in Indian cuisine," Lakshmi reminded them. And then came the knockout. She said, and I quote, "Semma isn't made for you, it's made for us. I'm pretty sure if nobody but Desi's went there for the rest of its existence, it would still be booked solid for the next decade. In other words, no one's waiting for your approval." To be fair, Padma Lakshmi did throw a bone their way. "You seem like nice girls," she said, before diplomatically suggesting they do a little homework next time before launching another unsolicited food assassination attempt. It wasn't just Padma Lakshmi who was annoyed by their reviews. One social media user called out food racism in the review. The user wrote, and I quote, mispronouncing, misspelling, and trashing an entire regional cuisine while longing for better dishes you couldn't even name correctly. It's giving ignorance. Several other users echoed similar sentiments. One user wrote, "Semma is incredible and it takes those with a diverse palate to appreciate it." Another stated, "You can't say tikki masala and then proceed to think you have a valid opinion on Indian food." And here's a look at a few more. In the end, it's a tale as old as TikTok. But this one comes with a lesson too. When venturing into a cuisine you clearly don't understand, maybe lead with curiosity instead of snark, or risk getting curried out of the conversation by someone who actually knows what they're talking about.
That's First Post America for this Monday, April 7th. I'm Eric Ham signing off from our studios here in Washington, D.C. Thanks so much, everyone, for tuning in.